The insidious nature of inflation. The United States Constitution guarantees a monetary unit with intrinsic value. The Supreme Court rendered this in U.S. v. Marigold in 1850. Thomas Jefferson once said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies." If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their money, first by inflation and then by deflation, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children will wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. Let's take a look at the insidiousness of inflation. First, it defrauds the citizen through deceit by moving people unknowingly into higher income tax brackets. Second, it violates the laws of God and man. In Proverbs 20:10 we read, "Diverse weights and diverse measures, both of them, are like an abomination to the Lord." And three, it gives the perception of gains at a cost of the underlying initial capital. And lastly, it privatizes gains for an elite group of bankers while socializing losses on the citizenry. So let's take a look at the effect of using legal tender notes. In 1957, I could purchase a 1,600 square foot home in Odessa, Texas for $13,500. That $13,500 was equal to 13,500 U.S. silver certificates, both of which would purchase 37,700 cartons of brown eggs. In 1982, there was no lawful money available, and that house was recorded as selling for $85,400, which that said $85,400 would purchase 37,700 cartons of brown eggs. In 2007, when that house sold again, it sold for the equivalent of $13,500, which was equivalent to 37,700 cartons of brown eggs, but it was recorded as selling for $175,000. So if I bought and sold the property for cartons of eggs, I would have had no gain and no tax due. If I bought and sold it for lawful money, I would have again had no gain and no tax due. But because the property was recorded using these manipulative notes, I had a purported gain of $161,500 with an alleged tax due of $55,000. Thus, the result is I lost nearly 30% of my initial capital due to taxes that were illegal and unconstitutional and immoral. So the result is the purported Federal Reserve note gain is actually a quiet theft in that it results in a physical property loss with a perception of an actual gain. Let's take a look at another example. In 1962, I could buy 4 shares of IBM stock. Those 4 shares would have cost $1,942, which was equal to 1,942 silver certificates, both of which would purchase 5,424 cartons of brown eggs. In 1982, after stock splits, those 4 shares would now equal 75 shares of IBM stock. And if I sold them then, there was no lawful money available to sell them, they would have sold for $4,884, which would have purchased approximately 4,266 cartons of brown eggs. Now, if we just stop right here, if I bought and sold them in 62 and 82, respectively, I would have ended up with a loss, a physical loss in terms of egg cartons of roughly 1,200 cartons of eggs, yet it would have been purported that I had a gain of nearly 2,800 bucks in value. Now, by 2007, those 4 shares with stock splits became equal to 300 shares, and the sale was recorded as $30,501, which equal to $2,338.56, both of which would have purchased 6,571 cartons of brown eggs. So if I bought the stock in 1962 and sold it in 2007 for cartons of eggs, I would have had a 17% gain in egg cartons and a total tax due at 15% of 172 egg cartons. If I bought and sold it for lawful money, I would have had a 17% gain in lawful money and a total tax due of $59.48. But because it was recorded in these manipulative notes, all of a sudden I have a gain of $28,559 with an alleged tax due of $4283.85. Thus, the result is I had an effective tax rate of 83% thrust upon me for capital gains rather than 15%. Thus, the purported Federal Reserve gain is actually a quiet theft in that it results in an 83% tax rate with a perception of a 15% tax rate. Most people aren't aware today that the U.S. monetary law that exists today defines 5 coins with intrinsic value. 4 of them are gold coins, a $50, a $25, a $10, and a $5, and one of them is the silver $1 coin, all of which are recorded in Title 31, Section 5112. Further, Congress enacted a law to prevent the debasement of paper currency by ensuring that the Secretary of Treasury maintain the equal purchasing power of each kind of United States currency. However, we know that he is not obeying that law today because we know that it takes roughly 35 $50 Federal Reserve notes to purchase or exchange for one $50 American Eagle gold coin. Further, we also know that there's some monetary differences in the law. Since 1878, when the Thompson v. Butler decision declared that a coin dollar is worth no more for legal purposes than a note dollar, even though within the market they may have different values. In 1878 and today, both had legal tender gold and silver coins. Both had legal tender notes, albeit in 1878, those notes were United States notes, and today they're Federal Reserve bank notes. Both the Federal Reserve bank notes and the United States notes were the obligation of the United States, and both have been declared of equal value. In 1878, though, those notes were redeemable at their face value, whereas today, those notes, in practice, are irredeemable, even though the law requires them to be redeemable. And lastly, the notes today are required to have the equal purchasing power of that of the coin, whereas in 1878, they weren't. So, let's take a quick look at some relevant law and cases. We had already seen that in Title 31, United States Code 50, Section 5119A, that the Secretary shall maintain the equal purchasing power of each kind of United States currency. In Title 12, Section 411, Federal Reserve notes shall be redeemed in lawful money on demand at the Treasury Department of the United States in the City of Washington, District of Columbia, or at any Federal Reserve Bank. Both the Secretary of Treasury and the Federal Reserve banks refuse to obey this law. Second, the Federal Reserve Bank won't even let you in the door to make this transaction. Title 31, Section 5112A, Sections 7 through 10 and E define the gold and silver coins that we discussed earlier. We mentioned the Thompson v. Butler decision, which says a dollar is a dollar, meaning a note dollar and a coin dollar have to be treated legally at the same value. However, today's law has supplanted that decision in that that is only true when the Secretary maintains the equal purchasing power of each kind of United States currency. In Eisner v. Macomber, Congress cannot, by legislation, alter the Constitution from which it alone derives its power to legislate, and within whose limitations alone that power can be lawfully exercised, meaning that the only way Congress can change the definition of a dollar is to amend the Constitution, which has never been done. And as we mentioned at the very beginning of this presentation, in United States v. Marigold, constitutionally coined money is a coin money of pure metallic standard of value with a known intrinsic value. Thomas Paine, who our forefathers read and understood well, said, "The laws of a country ought to be the standard of equity and calculated to impress on the minds of the people the moral as well as legal obligation of political justice. But tender laws of any kind operate to destroy morality and to dissolve by pretense of law what ought to be the principles of law to support. Reciprocal justice between man and man, and the punishment of a member who should move for such law ought to be death. Thomas Paine understood the dangers of using paper legal tender. He understood how it defrauded the American people, or would defraud the American people, and he understood the results of the immorality that is caused by such use. We have a constitutional crisis. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 1 of the United States Constitution states, "No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts." Questions I have for you is, what does your state declare as legal tender? And does your state enforce payment of taxes, fines, and other debts in anything other than gold and silver coin? Benjamin Franklin wrote in 1789, not long after the final ratification of the Bill of Rights to the Constitution. He said, "Since the federal Constitution has removed all danger of our having a paper tender," I'm going to stop there. The federal Constitution has removed all danger of our having a paper tender. The Constitution prevents what we have as a monetary system today. The Constitution has never been amended to allow for such paper monetary system to exist today. Therefore, the system we have in place today is unconstitutional. History shows us the solution. In 1786, under the paper money system, George Washington talked about the looting, the rioting, the bankruptcies, the sexual perversion, all the other immoralities that go along with paper money. And within 5 years after that, he wrote, "Tranquility reigns among the people with that disposition towards the general government which is likely to preserve it. Our public credit stands on high ground which 3 years ago would have been considered a species of madness to have foretold." In other words, if anyone had predicted that our economic and social ills could have been solved by simply making nothing but gold and silver coin our money, he would have been called crazy. So what should we do? Well, first, don't panic. Lawful money, silver and gold coins exist. We need to start using them. We need to look at the European transition model to transition ourselves away from the fiat Federal Reserve note currency back into constitutional money. We need to price goods and services throughout the state and in both Federal Reserve note units and lawful money units. We need to use the European model to transition all prices, taxes, fines, and other debts to lawful money units over the next 24 to 36 months. And lastly, we need to implement lawful money state banks, where all deposits and interests are paid in lawful money, gold, or silver coin. What else can we do? We need to start using specific lawful money language in all sales and licensing contracts to avoid the conflicts created by new laws and old opinions. We need to pay appropriate taxes in Federal Reserve notes and let the Secretary of Treasury worry about redeeming them at their face value. And we need to press both federal and state legislators to pass statutes ensuring the rights of all persons to receive all forms of United States coins and currency, and to exchange some forms thereof for others without discrimination or burden. Conclusion: start using lawful money, gold, and silver clause contracts when buying, selling, and licensing property. Minimize tax liabilities by using lawful money as the basis in all transactions, and minimize intrinsic value loss by using Federal Reserve notes to pay all taxes, duties, and imposts. Please write your state and federal representatives and send them copies of the Monetary Unit Protection Act and ask them to enact them. Lastly, for more information and other resources, please visit us at www.npn.net or watch the other videos and read articles and visit the sites of these organizations listed herein. I appreciate your concern for this country. We look forward to assisting you in any way we can. Thank you.